Hello, everyone. I'm Laura Valean, Senior Editor with Commercial Property Executive, and this is Crew Up, CP's quarterly podcast series featuring leaders from the Crew Network community. This quarter, I'm joined by Hilary Provinse, Executive Vice President and Head of Mortgage Banking at Berkadia, an industry veteran with more than 2 decades of experience, including on Wall Street. Hilary is a past Crew Network Distinguished Leader, with her company serving as a Crew Network Gold Level Partner. In this episode, we'll get to know Hilary a bit better as she'll share insights from her leadership journey, her views on inclusion and team development, and her perspective on how women in commercial real estate are transforming the industry. Let's dive right in. Hi, Hilary. Welcome to Crew Up. It's great to have you here.
Great to be here. Thanks, Laura.
To kick things off, I'd love to start with your day-to-day leadership role. You lead a vast national team of mortgage bankers. How do you support them every day, and what are some of the biggest challenges they're facing in today's financing environment?
Yeah, great question. And I manage our entire capital markets network, which includes our mortgage bankers, as well as our investment sales advisors. We have about 200 mortgage bankers who are in offices around the country, as well as close to 200 investment sales advisors who represent selling properties around the country. To focus on the mortgage bankers right now, I think one of the biggest challenges we've seen over the last year started with just the increase in interest rates, right? As short-term interest rates went up and then the long end of the curve as well, we entered a part of the commercial real estate cycle that we hadn't seen in several years. We'd been living in some really joyous, almost a joyous decade of very low financing costs. And, what we've seen as rates have gone up, both on the short end as well as the long end of the curve, is kind of a reset in values. And the last 24 months, essentially, buyers and sellers and investors have been trying to discern where is the right valuation for real estate, given that interest rates have risen so much. So I think the biggest challenge we're obviously facing is, where does that final reset end up? I think we're getting close to that point right now. What does it take to make deals work on the financing side as it relates to interest rates from a refinance or a recap standpoint? And where buyers and sellers willing to transact from a sales standpoint? So honestly, that kind of bid-ask spread in real estate is what we've been spending the last 24 months trying to figure out where that's going to end up.
You're managing such a large team, and I imagine it's difficult to identify people's strengths and what makes them suitable for the roles they have. How do you do that? How do you identify their strengths and make sure they're in the roles that really let them shine?
I think that's a great question. And over the course of my career, I think I've gotten better and better at it. I think you have to realize that you have to accentuate the strengths that people have. So some people may be really good at being externally facing salespeople, and that's their greatest strength, calling on clients. They're uninhibited and, fearless as it relates to, doing cold calls. They may not be the best execution person, to actually structure, but they're really good building those relationships. You have to accentuate what their strengths are and then supplement their weaknesses. You pair them with somebody who may be better at structuring, who may be better at the quantitative side of the business, to kind of heighten those strengths and minimize the weaknesses. It's really hard for a tiger to change their stripes in anything. I mean, I think all of us, any relationship you have in life, it's like with your partner, you can't make them into something that they're not. You can help highlight the things they're really good at and minimize the things they're not so great with. But that's kind of how I approach leadership as well, trying to understand what is that person, true strength, and making sure that's what drives them personally, because it also needs to be where their inner motivations, what are their goals and objectives, and really understanding that from your team is important as well.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think modern investors are looking for today? And how do your teams, your diverse teams, help meet those expectations more effectively?
I think the commercial real estate business has really evolved and become much more sophisticated over the last, 10 to 20 years. So investors today, it really depends on what sector you're in, but a lot of, most investors now are using really sophisticated quantitative data and analysis. We try to lean in with what are the actionable insights we can bring to their strategy, right? Really understanding, asking questions of your client on, what are your investment goals? Are they short term, medium term, long term? Are they a private equity firm? Are they are they a family office looking to build generational wealth? It really is understanding your client's goals and then leveraging data and insights to match what the client is looking for with the opportunities in the market. So it's a lot more sophisticated now, and you have to have a cohesive team of people, right? Like you can't just have a banker asking those questions. A lot of times we bring along our sales professionals, we bring along our equity team to really see if, is it fundraising? That's one of their challenges. We bring along different specialty products as investors get more and more sophisticated. They may want to look at seniors housing, affordable housing. So it really is, let's bring the whole, let's understand what the client wants, and then let's bring the right tools from our toolkit to serve them.
And this is why it's important for the teams to be diverse, to have multiple backgrounds, right?
And it's interesting, commercial real estate, even though it's gotten really analytical, and sophisticated, it's also still a relationship business, like any business. And clients need to trust you as an individual. And that's why meeting the client where they are with what is, our clients are all really diverse, individuals. And so what is the type of person that'll work well with that client? And so having a deep bench of professionals who, you may not want to go spend an hour having coffee with, but the client will, because that's the type of person they're connected to and they want to build the relationship with. And so it's kind of fun that way, kind of matchmaking what will work from a relationship standpoint, depending on the type of individual that you're dealing with.
Let's go back a bit to when diversity wasn't so talked about. What was it like to be a woman on Wall Street in the 90s, like you used to be at some point?
Was actually, I think that, toughened me up a lot. I started my career in the early 90s at Bear Stearns, which no longer exists. We lost them in the financial crisis with several of other financial institutions, but I was a fixed income trader when I got out of college. And so I sat on a trading floor at Bear Stearns in 1993, and I think there were 10% of the people on the trading floor were women. And there was like political correctness, like the terminology didn't even exist. And so I would joke, one of my dearest friends who's still in the business was another woman on the floor with me. And we were like, if we kept a journal of all the things people said to us and behaved, and obviously, it was still a publicly traded company, but it was very, very different and much more challenging than, corporations operate today. So I think what that did for me is highlight how I wanted my company, in the future, if I was going to be a company or build a company or be a leader, what would I want that to look like to make people of all different people feel welcome and like a valuable part of the team. But also, I think it toughened me up a lot, and it was quite entertaining. Let's put it that way. A lot of the things I probably couldn't say on this podcast.
Throughout the years, you've witnessed and shaped how women's roles in commercial real estate have evolved. How different is the landscape today from when you started out? Are you working with more women now than back then? I imagine you are.
Absolutely. It's been really fun. And I almost feel like it's like the last bastion of getting more, a broader segment of the population into this business line, because I do think Wall Street did a good job, in the probably late 90s, early 2000s, recruiting at colleges and broadening their funnel, right? So Wall Street, even though in the 90s when I started was not that way, it's much better now. Private equity kind of followed next. Commercial real estate, if you think about it too, in the 80s and 90s, it really was a country club. The owners and operators, it was very fragmented. It was very diversified. It was very relationship driven, and it honestly wasn't very institutionalized. And so I think that led to a lack of, diverse representation. That has really, commercial real estate has become much more institutionalized over the last, 10, 20 years. You have huge private equity firms that have unbelievably large stakes in it. You're seeing family, like very sophisticated international and domestic pension funds. The REITs didn't even exist. We have so many more women and, people of color and all different, folks that have kind of entered commercial real estate. It's still not what Wall Street. I mean, I think there's still an opportunity to continue that growth. And part of it is, having the brokerage firms match what the different subsectors of investors look like, so that you're kind of meeting your clients where you are.
Right. Why would you encourage young women to consider a career in commercial real estate? What kind of rewards or satisfactions has this industry brought to you personally?
And I think, personally, I've been so grateful for, the 3+ decades of evolution and growth that I've seen in commercial real estate. One of the things, and I think this is the same as a trader or as an investment banker, but like in real estate, the deals are so tangible, right? Like literally your finance, and they're very practical. Like one of the first deals I did, I'm sitting in Chevy Chase, Maryland right now, looking across the street, there's an apartment building that I financed probably 15, 20 years ago for the first time when the Archstone acquisition of Lehman Brothers happened. And they, and then that deal has traded hands multiple times since then. So you see these tangible assets that transact, they're, kind of fun to value, to structure. The deals have gotten bigger and bigger over the years. So you have, multi-billion-dollar pools with super sophisticated, huge private equity firms structuring them, down to like a 5-unit apartment building. I mean, it's really accessible for multiple people to kind of enter the industry because it is so fragmented. I think Jay Parsons has a great stat that he uses that the NMHC in multifamily top 50 owners of apartments own less than 10% of the stock. And so it's just literally still one of the most fragmented kind of sophisticated businesses out there. So that opportunity for both consolidation and scale growth, but also for accessibility for people that want to enter it and start just buying, $3 million retail centers or apartments is huge. So I think it's just the opportunity that affords, because it is such a fragmented industry, is really exciting for people.
Speaking of choosing a career, I know your father ran a real estate private equity fund and played an influential role in your career path. What were some of the most valuable lessons you learned from him?
I think that's a good question. And I think it speaks to I probably wouldn't have gotten into commercial real estate had I not known that was a career path. I think a lot of us do that, right? You see a lot of people that, become teachers because their, parents were teachers, or doctors because their parents were doctors. And I think, I was lucky and, kind of just went down that path because I saw my father doing it and thought it was a great opportunity. Some of the things that he taught me kind of just relate to the golden rule in general with humanity. Like, treat others the way you want to be treated. don't burn a bridge. Like it's all kind of basic.
Right.
It's all kind of basic, but it's true when you think about, don't burn a bridge. Commercial real estate's a small industry. A lot of industries are small, depending on how you behave. And that doesn't mean let somebody walk all over you. That doesn't mean, be taken advantage of. You have to stand up for yourself. You have to fight when, there is a reason to, but do it in a ethical, upstanding, respectful way to get the outcome that you deserve. And I think that's what I took away from my father, was really do the right thing in business as it relates to building relationships and growing relationships.
Speaking of relationships and working with other people and not burning bridges, I'm sure that over the years you probably worked for a wide range of leaders, different people, different styles of leading. What lessons did you take from the ones you didn't necessarily admire?
That's a great question. And I have been really lucky. I've had a lot of really wonderful mentors over the years who I've grown a lot from. And even if it's something, it's interesting because you have to not be careful, but like as you're looking at a mentor, it kind of goes back to those strengths and weaknesses conversation. You want to emulate the things will accentuate your strengths, but also recognize you're a different individual than they are. So I've learned a lot from really great leaders, but from the bad ones, what I've seen, honestly, what ends up getting the worst leaders in trouble tends to be their egos, honestly. And I think, when you are looking out for yourself more than you're looking out for your team or your company or the long-term goals, that tends to get people in trouble. So that ego, and it's interesting, we have a lot of big egos in commercial real estate. So sometimes that's, you want to have enough of an ego to get people to kind of follow you as a leader, to be inspiring, to bring a vision that a team will, and bring a strategy. And so ego is important, but you also have to learn how to kind of manage it.
Control it, yeah.
Yeah, not let it take over, and then end up squashing the people under you or forcing you to make decisions that are for the wrong reasons, perhaps. So.
Yeah. And how would you describe your leadership style today with all this background and all the people you've learned from?
I tend to be a very collaborative leader. I like, and I know not everyone's like that. And it's interesting. There are some unbelievable leaders that are extremely introverted. And so my style, I'm very extroverted. I like to hear diverse perspectives. I like to kind of work with people in real time to react to, and I know that's not how everyone likes to work. So I've had to be careful with my team to that's the way I like to work. I like to be collaborative. I like to hear different perspectives. I'm also very decisive. So once I make a decision, I'll get behind it. I'm not wishy-washy. Sometimes I'm too decisive. So, that's something I've learned over time. You have to hear different perspectives and not come in thinking you have the right idea. I've been burned by that, for sure, as a leader. But I think my style is definitely I enjoy a collaborative leadership environment.
You said earlier that you mentor yourself, people who are just entering the industry or are very new to the industry. Who do you mentor now, and what do you see in the next generation of commercial real estate leaders that excites you most?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's funny, it's something that I've had to find time in my calendar to stay with, because as you become more senior in any role, there's a lot of demands on your time. And be it strategic decisions, be it recruiting, be it transactions. I mean, I travel probably 3 days a week right now. So when I have time, so I have actually had to be intentional on, I mentor a couple of the new women producers at Berkadia who are coming into production. I've had to kind of push down some of the responsibility around that, because in the old days, I used to be able to spend, 30 minutes a week with somebody, having conversations, sharing my insights, getting theirs. And I just don't have time to have that level of consistency right now. I have kind of quarterly meetings with the people that I mentor, and I have to leverage other team members to do that. But what I see in this next generation is, inspiring and exciting, because I think they have a lot of self-confidence coming into the industry. I think they have a lot more probably intentionality than I did. I was probably pretty reactive about how my career unfolded at the beginning, and, was like, I put my head down and I work hard and people keep rewarding me. And luckily that's proved to be true. And I think with this next generation, they have very clear goals in the short term and long term for themselves, and they're not afraid to kind of ask for the things that they want. I am really curious, like commercial real estate, the way I grew up in it, like my first deals, I was crunching the numbers myself. Like I was making Excel spreadsheets. I was making Lotus spreadsheets, in the 90s. And so that's how I learned how deals worked and how things should be structured. I think with this new generation, it's going to be fascinating, because we're going to have we have AI, we have tools that do that for them. So they don't have to learn the same way I learned. And so how they're going to kind of accelerate in their careers without the need to be hands-on, it's going to be incumbent on organizations to figure out help them determine those development paths. And that's really exciting and interesting to me, because that's a big sea change with how we've grown talent over the last 20, 30 years.
In your view, what does success look like in commercial real estate? And has this view of success changed over time?
I think it depends. It goes back to that first point on strength. I think success in commercial real estate is what you want it to be. And different people have different visions of that for themselves. I was a child of where success in investment banking and commercial real estate was 80-hour. We worked 80-hour weeks to get up, I worked at Goldman Sachs after Bear Stearns, and the expectations around and my quality of life was very different than what a lot of, people starting out in the business today want for their life. So their success, maybe they may end up having a different path than I did because of the choices they made and how they define success. And I think it's important for everybody, like, what does success really look like for you? What are your goals? What are your objectives? And how are you going to achieve those? That's a very individual decision. Like, if you want to be in the C-suite of a company, you're going to have to make different choices and sacrifices than somebody. You could still have a phenomenal career in commercial real estate and be in asset management or be, decision maker on an underwriting team and have a really lucrative, exciting, fun career that also affords you probably more balance as it relates to work-life balance than somebody who's on the, track to be in the C-suite.
And it's also really difficult for women to to define success usually, because they're usually also caregivers, and they have their families and they have their babies and they have lots of things to take care of, and on top of that their professional life, and it's really difficult sometimes to juggle all of that. How do you see women leaders shaping the future of commercial real estate?
I say, when people have asked me this over the years, I say it's honestly incumbent on the men to pick up the slack. And like, part of the reason, and because you're right, like, men can't have the babies, obviously. And, men can adopt and things like that. I didn't have my first kids until I was in my late 30s. And part of that is I dedicated my career to, I made different choices. Well, when I
Mhm.
did, I obviously needed to, be a little more present when they were infants. But part of the reason I'm able to do what I do is that I have a husband that my husband was a lawyer. He made the choice a decade ago to kind of retire from his legal practice to support my career. And he's on a lot of nonprofits and he has but he drives the kids to school every day. He's at urgent care this morning with my 15-year-old who kicked her foot into a thing last night and had to go get an x-ray. Like, I couldn't have done that and been on this webinar with you. He can, so he's the primary caregiver of our children. And honestly, that's what's going to change societal, the ability of women to progress in their careers is more men who are confident enough and willing to take those roles on. That being said, I think there are plenty of couples. I mean, most couples are dual income families.
Of course.
And so, I think as long as you kind of navigate that appropriately with your partner, you're able to kind of both have the career and the family that you want. I chose, obviously, given my role and the fact that I travel 3 days a week, and I was really lucky that my husband was the one that was willing to step into that primary caregiver role. Not everyone has that, and I recognize that.
Right. I know you're also an active member of Crew Network. How has that community helped you over the years? Can you recall a time when being part of that organization made a real difference in your career?
I think what's interesting about Crew and what I appreciate so much about it is what a diverse part of the commercial real estate. I've been in commercial real estate kind of financing and capital markets my whole career. So I've been on the deal side. I think there are so many, and this is what Crew has done, there are so many women in property management, in leasing, in kind of third party providers as it relates to appraisals, or you go down the range of spectrum. And so some of the relationships and connectivity that I've built and that's broadened my perspective on commercial real estate is because of the women that are in so many different sectors of CRE. And Crew has done an unbelievable job accessing a network of women to kind of support each other beyond just capital markets, which is where my strengths are. But it's always so impressive to me. I meet such diverse women in different subsectors of commercial real estate whenever I go to a Crew event, and that I really love that.
And finally, if you weren't in real estate finance, what other career could you see yourself pursuing?
Oh, it's so funny because we all start down these paths and then you just kind of go. I mean, honestly, what I wish I could, so I do not have this talent whatsoever, but I love going to live theater. I love theater performances. And that's part of I love, getting up on stage and doing panels and talk. And if I had any, and I can't sing at all, I can't dance at all. But if I could have done anything and had magically had skills and talents, I think it would be so cool to be a Broadway performer. I have such huge envy and respect for people who can perform at that level every single night. I think that's really fun.
That would have been so different from what you're doing today.
Totally. And I have zero skills or talents to be able to do that. But I have a theater kid. My older kid is 7. My older daughter's 17, and she loves she's your quintessential theater kid. And I give her so much credit for she just had tryouts for the winter play, and it's just really fun to watch that cohort of kids.
You'll get to see your dream come true through her, maybe.
There you go. There you go.
Hilary, thank you so much for sharing your story and all these insights with me. It was a pleasure having you on the show.
Great. Thanks, Laura. It was fun.
And to my listeners, I appreciate you spending this time with us. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to rate, review, and follow CP Podcasts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you like to listen. That's where you'll find all of CP's podcast series, including Crew Up, so you'll never miss an episode. And of course, you can always stay up to date with the latest news, trend stories, and industry insights on our website. Till next time.